as you all know, this workshop, this webinar series, Leadership is Personal, came out of the Facebook Lives that I did earlier in the pandemic, as well as a webinar and then a coaching group. And the feedback that I got and what people were interested in was helping with work-life balance, integrating that, as well as advancing that, taking it further. And I got a bunch of different feedback. And so that's where this series is coming into play. And I'm excited that everybody is here. And thank you. So from that, then I started this webinar series. Last month, we had the webinar about setting goals and how you can get that in motion. And so today I wanted to take it a step further and talk about change, and change starts with you. And the reason I wanted to talk about change starting with you is because it does. I think, and leadership is personal because your leadership and any changes that you make, whether it's in your organization or for yourself, it really starts with you. If you're not working on yourself and if you're not paying attention to what's going on within you, the leadership and the successes that you have, while I hope they're great and they're plentiful, are at risk of falling through cracks. So this workshop, this webinar series is about helping you not have the cracks, to help you move forward and make decisions, to do that with confidence and with clarity. And so we're gonna be talking all about that for the next hour. So I am gonna go to screen share, and this way you guys can see what's going on here. And so for today, for Change Starts With You, we're going to break this down into 3 different sections. And so it's emotional maturity and how you're managing yourself, then the cycle of influence, which is internal interconnectedness and contributing factors, change influencers. Oops. And so as we do this, and I'm also reflecting on the different feedback that I've received. So these are things that some of you told me in the surveys or we talked about last month, and as well as over the past several months, what I've been talking about with my clients about different changes that people want. So work-life balance is always one, which includes self-care, which relates to losing weight and improving health, and confidence and mindfulness, as well as accountability, which I think can also go into personal. Most people want to grow their business. How about if you would put in the chat what you want to change, what you want to work on? That would be awesome. And I'd love to see that, and we can all see that. So these are just some examples of the changes, but let us all know some of the things that you've been thinking about as well. Increased focus. All right, Erin. Oh, Erin, it's good to see you. We chatted earlier. So as we break this down, I first want to talk about just a reminder of self-awareness, and that is the foundation of all change. So we talked a lot about self-awareness last month, and I include that in this month because without self-awareness, the changes that you make are a bit more luck-driven. And as you work on your own self-awareness and you work on your leadership and you work on emotional maturity, what happens is you're more deliberate and conscious in what you're doing and can be more effective and impactful and be more productive. So that ties into emotional maturity, which we've heard about emotional intelligence. I like to talk about emotional maturity in that it's bringing you to another level of interaction and engagement within yourself. It's putting things into motion. And emotional maturity, a big question that I like to ask is, what's my role and what's my part? And when you do that, what it helps with is creating an understanding of what your involvement is in a challenge. It reduces the likelihood of blaming people. And that's always great to not blame, so that you can take more responsibility for your part of any challenge. And there's a spectrum. So, you might be on the low end of emotional maturity, you might be on the higher end. When you have a lot of weight on your shoulders, so to speak, it's harder to be more mature. And so emotional maturity provides you with a framework that you can use. And I like to have this circle here, this pie, because it's like a wheel, and the more mature you are, and not even the more mature you are, the more you're working on your maturity, the smoother the wheel is. And so it's all interconnected. And we're just going to go through that. So I'm just trying to move this thing over here. Right, for self-awareness, that's your foundation of change. And it is you're acknowledging and identifying the challenges. And we did talk about last month about your values and your beliefs and your convictions, of course, doing that with responsibility and what you're feeling and you're thinking. But I wanted to also just mention for people to really pay attention to their own physiology, because you might find that you get red or you're out of breath or you have a stomach ache, you get a headache. Maybe it happens the day before you have something significant going on. But just paying attention to what's going on in your body, because you might get a headache, and a function of that might be that there is a challenge that you're experiencing, and it's worth investigating kind of what's going on with me, what's the problem, what am I working on, what am I anxious about. So the self-awareness piece is very complex, very comprehensive. So we're only discussing obviously an introductory part of this, but the next part I talk about is responsibility. And I like to say, especially to my kids, that I will not do for you what you can do for yourself. And so what I mean by that is, are you doing what you should be doing? Or are you doing what you shouldn't be doing? Meaning, whether it's with your family members or if it's with your colleagues, are you taking on responsibilities that extend beyond you? And if you are, well, it's nice and you might like to be helpful and you get value from that. The challenge is you might be not responsible enough to you and your responsibilities, your work tasks, your family responsibilities, taking time for your self-care. So if you're doing your work at night and you're staying up late or work late, or you're doing it on the weekends, because you're helping someone else within reason, maybe you shouldn't be. Yes, it's nice to help people out. We're in the pandemic. We all want to help each other. But if you're kind of crossing that line of where it's too much, where you're enabling someone else to do what they should be doing, but they're not doing it, think about that. And the responsibilities should be aligned with your core values and all the different aspects of self-awareness, so that they're integrating together. They're working well, they're intertwined. And then you've got regulation, self-regulation, and that's managing your responses. So it's like, look at the situation for what it is. If you're in traffic, some people are irate in traffic, although I think many of us aren't in traffic as much these days. But if you're so annoyed and it's terrible because you're going to be late for something, in reality, I don't know if it's so bad. If you look at the pandemic, that reaction might be more of a worthwhile reaction. So do your best to be reality-based, because when you're using words like the worst or always, or it's required, I have to do it, what that does is you're also feeding that mindset, and it becomes harder to regulate. So if you recognize that you're exaggerating something, being more theatrical about it, it might help you bring that back to a more accurate, a more reasonable place. And that will help you with managing stressors and challenges. And that, again, feeds into the two other categories here. And then you work on connection. So in the workplace, some people are like, I don't want to be friends with the people that I go to work with. I don't want to do that. And I'm not saying that you need to be friends with people. What I'm suggesting is developing and nurturing a relationship, because it's helpful to have a two-way dialogue. First of all, it's helpful to bounce things off of people. It's helpful that you can ask people for help if you need it. And also, if there's a challenge, if you have a problem with someone or just a difficult situation, when you already have an established relationship, it's easier to connect with them. They know you, they know where you're coming from, they know how you think. So developing connections is really an important part. Again, you don't have to disclose what you did on the weekend, but have active listening, ask questions, tell them what you think about the meeting or the project. You can do all that. Let's see, someone asked, what do I mean by automatic thinking? Okay, and I'm just looking at the other ones. Teaching self-awareness, great. So what I mean by automatic thinking, and also someone said, how does having a good connection with my colleagues relate to my emotional maturity? Okay, these are good questions. Thanks for asking. Thanks, Jessica. So I'm just trying to fix the screen here. Sorry. So as far as automatic thinking, people have a gut instinct, or people just give a quick answer, yes, no, of course I wouldn't want to do that. Absolutely. That's just automatic. You don't think about it. You're not giving credit to what your response would be if you sat for a few minutes, or sometimes it's a few weeks, depends on what the decision is, to think about it. So as you work on your emotional maturity and the other two elements that we're going to talk about in a few minutes, what it does is it puts in the thinking mindset. It allows you to not only look at what you're thinking, but what you're feeling, and then make a decision about, or a way to think about this scenario that you were just automatically making a decision. So if you could slow down, you still might make the same decision. The optics may look the same, but the experience that you have is landing you in a place where you know that you are focusing on and making and taking action and doing things that are aligned with what your responsibilities are and what you want. So hopefully that is clear. And then having good connections with my colleagues. How does that relate to emotional maturity? So if you're in a situation that's challenging and you have a lot to work on and you have a lot of things going on at home and it's a pandemic and you're trying to figure out how your kids are going to school, it's a lot on your shoulders. We all have a lot. It's a very complicated, complex time right now. So your ability to regulate, the ability to be calm in a situation may not be as easy than if you just came off of a nice vacation on the beach. And so when you are paying attention to what's going on in you and you have a challenge, then your colleagues, you're able to communicate with them and discuss what's going on. And so it might be that you need help. It might be that you have a question. It might be that you are disagreeing with something, and it's just easier to be you and the authentic you when you've cultivated a relationship. If it's your supervisor or if it's a direct report and you have to do an annual review, it'd be really great to not be delivering a challenging message for the first time then. Whereas if you have an open dialogue, you're able to communicate, you can tell them different things that you want them to work on, or you'll be told things that you need to work on, areas of growth and development. So that's what I mean by having a good and open communication. So I hope that answers that. If there's any other questions, just put them in the chat. And don't forget about those boxes there. Let's hold on a second. Okay, that was it. All right, and building confidence. So confidence is not, sometimes I think of it as an outcome of working on all of these different elements of emotional maturity, but also confidence can help you with other things. So when you're confident, you might be more apt to have a connection, a relationship, and a conversation with you might be more apt to have a conversation with someone that you're connected with because you're not as nervous about sharing that difficult message. So it's being comfortable and accepting your own actions and really trusting yourself to take that extra step, or trusting others to share with them a piece of information, and to be discerning and not getting swayed back. So a lot of people will like the togetherness, oh, we all think the same thing. It's that group thing. We're all in a meeting together and we're planning an event, and you don't think that that's the right event to have, but it might be challenging to be the one person that raises your hand and says, excuse me, but I don't think that's so great. If you have the confidence, you're going to be more apt to ask that, or to say that and feel more comfortable, or to have a difficult conversation. And in your personal life too, it comes into play as well. The more confident you are, the easier it is going to be to do other things that you want to do, to maybe start something new, a new craft, a new project, a new hobby that may seem like you don't have time for and your family wouldn't want you to, and the confidence is getting in the way. It might be less of a challenge. And the more responsible you are, the more confident you might be, and vice versa. So it's all interconnected, and they influence each other. There's another question here. Why should I be asking myself, what is my part when my colleague is late on a deliverable? Okay, I love this one. So what is my part when someone is not showing up, they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing? I still encourage my clients to say, what is my part? What is my role? And it might be that there is no role. But if you are involved in, like, for example, I worked with an accounting firm, and everybody at different levels does a certain part of it, and they would pass on what they have to do. But when it was a different group and things weren't done, or a different level of staff, they weren't doing what they needed to do, the other people were like, it's not my fault, they're doing it. And the more people could say, what's my role, what's my part, they can check in. If there's deadlines with accountants, there's really firm deadlines. And so what is your role in making sure that you meet the deadline? And even if the documents haven't reached your desk yet, what is your role? Should you be following up? Maybe you shouldn't be following up. Should you be thinking about how you can make sure people are trained in what they're doing? I also think one of the examples that I also like is with kids. When their kids are leaving their lunch at home and they keep calling their parents to bring lunch, and sometimes parents will continually bring lunch to the kids. And then the next morning, don't forget your lunch, don't forget your lunch. And the kid forgets his or her lunch. And what is your role? Your role is that you're constantly picking up the slack of your child and bringing the lunch. And so you might want to play hardball and say, I'm not going to bring you your lunch today, and you're going to be hungry, but your child's not going to be in danger. And so your part is that you're continually bringing the lunch. And if you don't bring the lunch, there's a good chance that the next day your child is going to remember the lunch. The same thing when you have an accounting deadline. You don't want to be at work until 4 a.m, which my clients would be when there's a deadline. And so your part 2 months prior, when there's prep work, might be to check in and to be accountable to what work is on its way to you. So I hope that gives some things. So Vito says, what's your secret for building confidence in yourself and others? Thank you, Vito. So I don't know that there's such a secret. What I do think is the more people slow down and they work on these different aspects in this wheel in the next 2 sections that we do, what it does is it helps people be more in a thinking mindset. It helps people pause, literally and figuratively, and say, what's going on here? How do I think about this? I'm going to actually, Vito, we're going to get a little bit more to that at the end with contributing factors. So I'm going to get to that a little more after. Hope that's okay. Oh, so hold on a second. I can't get back. How do I get back here? So just to wrap up this emotional maturity, again, it's all interconnected. When you're working on one part of this, you're influencing the other. So the more connected you are, the more self-aware you are, because you're paying attention to what's going on and what you're willing to say, which can help you being self-regulated, which can help you then be more responsible, which might help you with confidence. And you can just take that around any which way to apply it. It's just, they're all interconnected and influence each other. And the more you're doing this, the more you're heading over to that higher level of emotional maturity, which then in turn is helping you think through things more. So I know that's a partial answer, Vito, to that, and I'll continue. If there's any other questions, just put them in the chat. Okay, the next section that I wanted to get to is what I call the cycle of influence. And I have this purplish circle with these 4 elements inside, because while they're each their own, they're also interconnected. Again, there's a lot of interconnectedness going on here in our own growth and development. And so as we go through this, it's helping to develop our self-awareness, because you're again looking at situations through another lens. So you're looking at the realities, the facts that are related to your current situation as they're seen through your eyes. So family dynamics vary for everyone. You know, one person is going to say their family is very close, and a sibling in that same family might say, oh, we're so dysfunctional. Someone else is going to be excited for the election. Someone else is going to be anxious for the election. Someone else likes their job and thinks their boss is great. And then a colleague thinks their boss is really hard and not really helping them grow and develop. So you have your own realities to a situation, which then contributes and leads to how you react. So what is your emotional response to the situation? It can be verbal and nonverbal, kind of like I talked about the physiology before. You know, what is your curiosity factor here? How are you responding to that? Are you happy? Do you talk with others about this? How are you reacting to a situation? Just checking. And then we all have different perspectives. So it's the way you see something. So I see something one way, you see it another, and that influences us to respond a certain way, just like our perspective influences us, but also what our perspective is will influence the response. So again, there's this cycle. So someone would say they have a solid marriage, and sometimes there's a spouse that would say we don't. And just like the same example with a supportive boss. Someone might be wanting to change a job and they look at different situations like this. The reality is that this is a tough time to find a new job. The reactions are, well, I don't like my job, and I understand that but I want a job. And then the perspective is everything that's going on around you. Maybe getting a new job for you, you had a challenging experience in the past. So given the environment and given what's going on, you might want to hold off on this desire. And then you also have the context, which relates to all of that too. So when you're looking at context, though, I always encourage people to not be laser focused, but to have blinders on and look for the broad range of details. Look at the whole scope of things. And so what is the experience that you might have? What is the job market like? What are your salary situations? Is that challenging situation as well? And so, okay, any feedback, feel free. And it's also important to remember that no two situations are the same. So a lot of people are like, I've been through this before. I know exactly how this is going to go. And you might be right, but the reality is that you haven't been through the situation before. So if you're treating it in the same context as you did before, you're helping it repeat itself. But if you look at the context and you see what realities are different, you might respond differently, you might react differently, and then you might have a different perspective. So treating things for what they are and not what they seem like they'll be or what they feel like or what you've done before helps you have that, that increased awareness and an increased understanding about what's going on, which then will help influence making a decision and making a change. Okay. How you guys doing? Hope everyone's good. Okay. And Vito, this is going to bring, glad Gillette, you're doing well. Good. And then contributing factors. So this is one of my favorite parts. This is, I love thinking about contributing factors because it's giving you a multi-dimensional view of what's going on. And so it's so easy for people to blame other people and to just focus on one person, and that one person then can often become the scapegoat. But I do think that there is more to it. And when you do step back and you do have that broader vantage point and you do look at the broader context, what you might see is very different than what you are thinking. Okay, there's another question. Okay, this all makes sense. And I get that change starts with me, but I have no idea where I should begin. What should I be doing first? And that's a tough one. So I think you start where you are, which is kind of a very broad answer. But if you're feeling very stressed at work, what I would then do is I would examine what that stress is. First of all, what does the stress feel like? I want to know what that is, what that means to me. And then I also want to be doing exactly what we're about to do in this section, which is asking myself, you ask yourself a lot of different questions. So instead of saying I'm really stressed because I have a deadline to meet, and then you're kind of looking at it with blinders, how do you get more broad? Because you might have a deadline, which you can meet the deadline if you didn't have 100 other things to do. You can meet the deadline if you are being responsible about doing your work, but not everyone else's work. So as you pay attention to what you're feeling and what you're thinking, what happens is this tight ball of stress and frustration will loosen up, and you can start seeing the contributing factors. You can build a different perspective of what's going on. You still might be stressed out and you still might have to figure out how to make the change. But once you're thinking about things with greater clarity, it eases up the challenge, because once you have that clarity, then you can come up with a responsible plan. And if you have the responsible plan, you're going to be more likely to have the confidence or the courage to move forward with it. So it's not necessarily an instant response and an instant solution. It's more of this growth and development process and effort that you make. Sometimes it can be applied to a very quick situation, but if someone has someone wants a new job, or if someone is having a challenge with their family, these are different ways to look at it, is really try to dissect it and to look at the broad scope. Donna Kennedy. Hi, Donna. Oh my gosh, yes, this part I definitely need to work on. All right, so this all ties right into contributing factors. And I can't emphasize enough that all of this work is helping reduce blaming people. The more you don't blame people, the easier it is to not have blinders on. And one of the ways is by asking who, what, when, where, and how questions. So we're going to go through this. All these questions that I have are not specific questions that you need to ask. The point here is just asking who, what, when, where, and how questions. And so as you do that and apply the questions to your situation. So in that example of where do I know to make change? These are questions that you could be asking yourself. So what is the challenge? What do I need to change? So an example that I have is just a general example is saying yes when you should say no. Again, it's going back to that over-functioning or taking more responsibility than you need or should. So what is the challenge? The challenge might be that you feel badly saying no. The challenge is that you feel good when people are happy that you're helping them out. The challenge is that you aren't home in time to be with your family, or maybe like me now, you don't get out of your home office to go down the hall and have dinner with your family, because I haven't been in my office in 33 weeks, but who's counting? So when you're asking this question, what is your challenge? It then helps you think about what is the change that you want. And then again, like this join in the chat here, is your change and what you want to change, is it realistic? I mean, it may not be realistic to look for a new job right now because it is a tough job market and it's not easy to interview, and you may not want the stress of getting acclimated to a new job if you can even find one. So you have a challenge, and what do you want to change? Maybe you want, in that situation, work on your mindset and start thinking about what's going on that can help you be more comfortable with that uncomfortable job situation. So the who question is, who's impacted by this challenge? And so, yes, obviously you're impacted, and the person that you're no longer going to be doing all their work for, they're going to be impacted, but also people that are used to coming to you to get help, they're going to be impacted because you'll start learning how to say no, and you might start to feel less frustrated, but you also have to get uncomfortable. So the change is also your willingness to get uncomfortable and to tell people that you're not going to be doing something. You might want to do it, but perhaps you don't have time. And if you're starting to prioritize yourself and putting your needs before the needs of others, again, in a responsible way, then you're going to be impacting change. Now, when are you going to do this? You know, when are you faced with the challenges? Are you faced with them when you're in the meetings and people are asking you to do things? Are you faced with them at 4 in the morning when you're up at night worried and stressed, or at dinner time when you're not with your family, or on the weekends when you're outdoors in the soon to be cold weather, social distancing, but you're actually home doing work? You know, what's going on? And when does this frustration and need for change happen? And when are you motivated to make the change? I don't know. For me, if I know something's going on, when I'm feeling that frustration and stress, that's my reminder. It's just not necessarily the right time for me to make the change. So I also need to go back and reflect. I like to look back on my day. I look back on the week. I log things. And so as I see that there's challenges, then I'm also going to be motivated to change. So I'm just curious when you notice to change, like when do you realize that something's not going right and you have to do something about it? So I want to see something in the chat, please. And okay. And so where does this challenge occur? So again, it could be when you're trying to fall asleep. It could be when you're in meetings. It's all different places. Again, it's not so much about where does the challenge occur. It's just asking yourself these who, what, when, where, and how questions as a way to, Maxine, when you get to your boiling point, yes, that's when change has to occur. Of course, in that, Maxine just wrote in that she makes a change. She wants to make a change when she can't, well, someone wrote when they can't get back to sleep, but when you get to your boiling point is what Maxine said. And that's definitely the time where I would think about when I want to make change. And it's probably the worst time to make a change. So what my clients will tell me is, oh, I've said that 100 times and it never works. But if you've said that, whatever that is, 100 times, and you're always not happy and you're stressed out, the other person is hearing you in that reactive state. And so it's not, it's, you're not hearing it as much. So that's why the change happens when you pause and you think about it and you go through these who, what, when, where, and hows. When you think about the reality and the reactions, as you do all that, what happens is, and you'll start to communicate differently, because you'll be letting people know in a calmer state the changes that you want to make, because you're also going to have more confidence to do that. So this, again, this is all the interrelated part. Okay. Donna, when you're exhausted, yes. Tired is hard. Like when I keep trying the same thing over and over and realizing that it's not working, I realize that it's time to make a change, and in a different way. Yes, Jessica. Audrey says, ready to make a change when I've decided what I want. Oh, that's a tough one. When you're not sure what you want, but you know a change needs to happen. I think that's also, and we're going to talk about this in other webinars coming up, but if you know something needs to change, but you don't have what might feel like a solution or an alternative, if it's a change and it involves someone else, that's an opportunity to communicate it. Most people want to have an answer and a resolution, and they want to fix something. And oftentimes the recipient of the conversation wants to come back with fixing it. But that's where active listening is really helpful, and curiosity on the receiving end of this is helpful to ask the person what's going on. Ask yourself what's going on. Ask yourself all these different questions, because you may not have an answer, but of what you need to be doing different. You just know that you want to and make a change. But the more you go through this exercise, you may not come up exactly right away with what you want to do, but you also might be able to rule out what you don't want to do. And that in its own right could be helpful. Also, communicating with the people that are relevant about your challenge can be helpful, and that can be impactful, because just the mere act of people knowing what you think, not what they're doing wrong, but what you're responding to, what's challenging you, can be one, cathartic for you to share that with people that maybe should know that information. And for the other person, whether or not he or she is happy with that, if you're speaking about your thoughts and your feelings, it's hard to contest that because they're yours. If you're accusing them of doing something, all bets are off, because then you get into a tit for tat situation. But again, just communicating that a change needs to happen without a resolution, I think, is a great start to easing the burden of what you're experiencing, even without the desire. Okay, Jamie said, when I can't handle it anymore and I'm exhausted and it affects my family. Yes. A lot of times people think that their family is really annoying, and they're, especially after we've all been living together in such close quarters, most people don't want to say their family is annoying, but they might feel that way. If you can pause and have that reality-based thinking, that self-regulation, you might realize that what your family is doing is the same thing that they do all the time. And last week when they did it, you thought it was great. So what's the variable? You're the variable. What's my role? What's my role in my family being challenging today? My role is that I have so many other things going on in my life right now that it's difficult to manage. And so when people can think about that, by pause and think, and what's my role, you might realize that it's not that someone else is challenging you. It might be that, kind of like Jamie, you're really exhausted. And Jill says, I make a change when I'm not happy anymore. So my question would be, can you catch yourself before you get to the unhappy stage? Can you recognize the signs of the decreasing in the happiness and realize that maybe something else is going on, and maybe you're feeling something and reacting to something, and before you get to that place where there's no return, you can start to calibrate. You can take new paths for doing things and finding happiness. And Jill says she feels that. Awesome comments. Love them. Keep them going. All right, so the how for the contributing factors is, for example, how are you impacted by this challenge? Obviously, you're going to get more specific with your challenge, and then think about how the change will benefit you. The change might be scary, and maybe what benefits you is that you worked your way through that. You had the courage and you realize that you can come out on the other side intact and you can make a change that you want, you need, that you value, even if it's not what the other person wants. Again, I always say with responsibility, but to be doing that, to really think about how a change is going to benefit you and benefit your happiness, your well-being, the people that are involved with it. You know, I don't encourage you to make a change that's then going to mess everybody else up. But how do you make a change responsibly? And so that is going to help you with setting boundaries. It might reduce family stress. It might help you be more accountable. You might be helping other people be more accountable. You actually, by you making this change, you might be helping other people learn. You know, if you're always doing things at work, you know, nobody knows how to do that. Nobody knows how to do that quarterly report. I have clients that say that. No one knows how to do it. I have to do it. I've had this with clients that talk about, I have a client who has mommy guilt, and on her day off, she would always be volunteering at the schools. And then it got too much to do, whether it was this quarterly report or it was volunteering at the school. And both of these individuals told me, there's no one else to do it. I have to do it. There's no one else. These things have to get done. And my question would be, well, if you were on vacation or you're sick or you had a new job or you had to work that day and you couldn't be at the school, who would do it? Meaning other people will figure things out. If you're always the one doing something, it's really hard for other people to learn. So when you step back and you change what you're doing, you're gifting other people the opportunity to learn and develop in their roles. They may not see it that way right away because they can't get away with not doing stuff, but that is one of the outcomes when you make a change. So Jill said, you have to let others be responsible. That's my biggest problem. I'm a micromanager. Micromanaging can be exhausting. And Jill, you said also, Jill's also a perfectionist. If you're a micromanager, you're very involved and other people don't necessarily have the latitude to then be accountable to themselves. So if you think your colleagues or your direct reports or your kids are irresponsible, again, ask yourself, what is my role in that? If you're micromanaging people, it's going to be really hard for them to step up and do what they need or should be doing. On the flip side, if you're working with that person, then if they build up and work with their confidence and they're willing to have the courage and take the step to do something, the micromanager might realize, oh, I don't have to micromanage that person. So it's cyclical. It's people are interacting. And Jill said, but my kids are better because of my micromanagement. I'm going to challenge that, Jill. I'm not saying they're not good, but what would happen if you weren't available to micromanage them? Would they be able to figure out how to take care of themselves? I'm going to guess yes. So I don't know if the micromanaging is serving the person who micromanages more, or if it's serving the people that are being micromanaged. And it might be both, and it might be neither. So again, every situation is different. Every scenario is different. Sometimes one person says it's micromanaging, one person is coaching, one person is teaching, one person is mentoring, one person is reacting to another person. So again, these are all individual scenarios that are to be applied without assumption that they're the same for everybody. So it would not be right for me to say what Jill is doing. I'm just using her example as an example. Erin is saying, I'm the opposite of Jill. I am not a micromanager, but I have high expectations of others to be mature, accountable, responsible, etc. I'm often let down, not surprising. Well, that's interesting. So again, I would ask, what is my role in that? What's my part? Maybe you're an underfunctioner and therefore people are overfunctioners, but if they're overfunctioning and doing more than what they should or need to be doing without guidance, they don't have a roadmap. You know, how do people know what to do? And so perhaps one of the angles of being disappointed is not communicating upfront what you need and what you expect. So that's my thoughts on that, Erin. Okay, Jamie said, I used to micromanage and it's a blessing to have taught others and taken the pressure off myself. Oh, that's great. That's awesome. That's awesome. And Maxine agrees with Erin. Jill is saying interesting. And Erin, okay, that's a great point. So good, Erin, I'm glad you like that. So we're gonna move right along. We're nearing wrapping up. So when you put this all together, as you can tell from me today that it's very hard for me to say you have to do one thing and then you have to do the other, because it's all interconnected. And so I even think that emotional maturity and the cycle of influence and contributing factors, they are also interconnected as well. And when you're working with that, then you make a change. It might be this much of a change. A little bit of a change takes you a far way. I use the analogy, if you're driving on a road, a dirt road, and you are on a path and you suddenly veer off a tiny bit, go an hour later, you're going to be far away from where you started. But it just started as just a tiny little bit of a change. And so it's not that anyone needs to walk away from this webinar and go make a 180. It's if you could take one of these examples and think about it, ask yourself one different question, you might open up your thought process and you might think about something differently and you might respond just a little bit differently. But if you respond differently to a situation, then therefore someone else will respond differently. Because when you make a change, someone else inevitably has to make a change. Because if someone's reacting to you and you are doing something differently, they have something different to react to. So again, it's not that you have to go be drastic in what you're doing, just a small change of what you're thinking about and how you're willing to show up. Okay, Jessica said, why is there no why in contributing factors? Okay, I was wondering if someone would notice that. So I'm a big fan of who, what, when, where, and how questions, and I leave out why, which people debate me all the time about this. But generally speaking, why did you do that? I did this because. So it's a very cause and effect. And I think of situations as having these contributing factors and having multiple things that influence, and even your maturity contributes to how you respond. So I don't think of something as just impacted by one thing. So to ask, why does that happen? It's not just, why do you wear a winter jacket in the winter? Because it's cold. Well, there's other factors involved too. When you're cold, this happens, this happens. Why are we inside our house and during this pandemic, and then outside we're wearing masks? There's many different factors that support that rationale, that reasoning. So I don't like to think of just one thing as a cause. I like to think of what contributes to a situation and impact you on what you want to change. And when you could do that, again, I think that opens up by asking yourself these questions. Now, I've debated this a lot. So some people will, when you ask the question, why, what you're really doing is answering the who, what, when, where, and hows. So you might still get to the same place, but it's very rare that you're going to hear me ask a question that starts with why. So I hope that answers that question. And so again, all of this is individually and collectively influencing how you go about making changes. So when you work on all of this, what you're doing is you're increasing your self-awareness. By asking yourself even just one question and thinking about it, you're increasing your awareness on the situation, on your thoughts of the situation. You're getting to know what you think, what you want, what you believe. You're starting to recognize what you feel about a situation. And the more you do that, I truly believe the more you're setting yourself up for a positive change. Again, these small shifts, even if the shift is just slowing down, is not being automatic. If you can slow down and think about the decision that you're making, again, even if it's the same decision, I firmly believe, I really believe, I've lived it, that the experience that you have is different. Because when you make a choice to do something rather than instinctually doing it, you have more buy-in from yourself. The experience, the perspective that you have is the mindset that you have. It's there, it's influencing you in a positive way. So again, that small shift of pausing might take you down a different path, or it might take you down the same path, and you might have a better mindset about it. And then also the pausing and the thinking and going through all of these, it helps you strategize what you want to do. It could help you in a business and how you want to take your business and your team further, because you can apply all of this to a team. But if you're working on your own leadership and you're doing this for yourself, it's going to show up in your work as well. So this is really what the personal growth and professional development work is. And that is that, unless there's people have more questions. we're going to meet again in November for Your Voice Matters, Making Decisions with Clarity and Courage, inspired by the election, but it'll be after, and I'm not getting political here, but it is inspired. The theme is inspired by that. And if you haven't already, join me on social media. I'd love to see you there. It's, oh, let me get out of that. Hi. So it's, if you can follow me on social media, I'd love to hear from you there, or anyone's welcome to email me, to communicate by social media. I'm happy to do that. And that is that, unless anyone has any more questions and wants to say anything, share anything. You know, don't forget, tomorrow you're going to get a survey, and on Friday someone's going to hear from me about getting a gift card. And with that, we got in under an hour, just like I wanted. And if anyone has any questions, MD, you're welcome. Jamie, you're very welcome. I hope to see everyone next month too.